All right, hello and good afternoon. My name is Cecil Brookins. I am a volunteer with Seven County Services in Bellwood and Brookline, and I serve on the planning committee for the Minority Mental Health Summit. Coming up next is our last session of the event called the Barbershop Off the Cuff, conversations. We are glad you can join us for this candid panel discussion about the stigma that surrounds mental health, especially in minority populations, the challenges that minorities are facing in our communities today, and access and resources to get help. In this session, you're going to hear from, I have three speakers. We would probably the third speaker will be joining us pretty soon. But those are Dr. Stephen Nifley, who is the Chief Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at Spalding University. Dr. Rashad Abdur Rahman, who is Executive Advisor for the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. And last but not least, Dr. Jermaine Ali, who is a child and adolescent psychiatrist with Seven County Services. If you'd like to ask a question, there is a Q&A feature in the tool that we encourage you to use, and you can pretty much put questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring those as we go through this panel. If there's some time towards the end, I'll entertain more questions. Again, thank you for joining us, and we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right.
Still morning for a few minutes.
Right. Exactly. It's been early. I looked at the clock and I was like, okay, it's still 11:30, but all right. So we're gonna jump right in. So again, thank you all for joining this panel discussion. Again, we'll just start with I'm gonna throw a question out there. So, Katie, why don't you all just give me your personal views or experience with mental illness?
You just took a gulp of that coffee, so I'll jump in. So my personal experiences. The reality is that all of us know or are related or in relationship with individuals who may have varying degrees of behavioral health needs. And, I like to think of all of it on a spectrum. I mean, all of us, go through different periods in our lives where, we might be experiencing different mood fluctuations or different experiences that might require us to talk to someone. I think we need to normalize talking to someone. And so this isn't sort of a isolated or rare sort of thing, but rather, just sort of a normal part of life. And so I know that I've benefited from having individuals that I could speak with in a professional setting to just debrief various life experiences that have been more or less challenging. And so in having had some of the professional experiences that I've had doing work in a behavioral health space, I've been able to understand and validate the value of seeking that kind of support and resource for yourself. So, that's something that I can personally attest to as being incredibly valuable and helpful. Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute. Dr. Ali, you want to chime in?
Yeah. My own experience with behavioral health, as a child, I saw people just around me, whether it was family members or even friends, and you wonder why they are, just for lack of a better word, behaving the way that they are behaving. Okay, and so you see that, you wonder, you hear stories about, whatever, this is what they experience, this is what they're going through, and a curious mind such as myself, I was just like, I was like, I hear you, but that I still want to get to the bottom of my own understanding as to why this person, does what they do. And then how can they be helped? Is there some way to help them? So, noticing that from childhood, adolescence, growing up into adulthood, still asking those same questions. Why do they behave that way? I really think that um, seeking one's own mental health services, which I'm sure we'll probably get into here in a second. That can be a stumbling block for a lot of members of the African American community. But it's very vital to be able to have your own mental health services, or just someone that you can talk to, that qualified professional, in this sense, that can help you work through things, adversity, whatever that you might encounter.
Wonderful, wonderful. Again, this is Barbershop talk, candid. So I'm just going to jump right in. I mean, this is I don't think there's any restrictions on the questions or the topics we want to cover today. So I'm going to jump right into it. So we know that here locally, especially last summer, we had the social injustice. We had. It was just Louisville got really, 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 really. It became ground zero, right, for the social injustices. Dealing with the Breonna Taylor, and then it's just, and I know me personally, I felt like that played a lot of role on my mental state as far as how am I understanding how to function as a community advocate, a community leader, and all of those things just became a mental pressure, I think, on me. How did that impact you all? How did you all deal with that, especially from a Black male's perspective?
Yeah, I can share. When Breonna was murdered, and we saw George Floyd's murder, the reality is that we all have been living in the largest civil rights mobilization perhaps in history. If we look at the responses, not just nationally, but internationally. And so on the one hand, we see this momentous, incredible culmination of not just the things that people were demanding in 2020, but the things that Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks have been demanding for 400 plus years. And we see that dynamic, and we understand that these issues are not new, but we do have more technology, we do have more capability to capture some of the things that people have been saying for generations. And so on the one hand, there's this tremendous momentum in terms of the kinds of conversations that are happening and the kinds of demands that are being made and the opportunities for shifts in policy and practice. And to your point, on the other, there's this incredible pressure and this incredible amount of personal and interpersonal trauma that results from that. And I believe I saw a statistic that George Floyd's murder had been viewed 1.6 billion times on social media. How does that level of witnessing the destruction of a human being, how does that kind of experience impact us, not just as individuals, but as interconnected people, as communities? We have to talk about that. We have to talk about the ways in which it's impacting us consciously and subconsciously. And I think that there are really important ways that we can process these things in a communal kind of way, in a collective sort of way. We don't need to necessarily try and deal with these things on our own. We can have conversations like this, and we can have other conversations in group settings and with folks that we care about and who care about us to help process some of these things. But there's an intersection, I think, in terms of not only how we show up as individuals, but also how we show up in formal spaces. And so on the one hand, many of us watched a 9-minute video of a man being killed, and then we're expected to come to work the next day, turn in that report, make sure you're getting this done or this deliverable completed. And we're going to be sort of totally, at least artificially aware of the context that we're operating in. And so how do we continue perpetuating this dehumanization when we know that there are horrors being witnessed in local community here in Louisville as we talk about Breonna Taylor's murder, but also nationally as we look at George Floyd and Daunte Wright and Rayshard Brooks and so on. And so for us to sort of ignore those things and to not create accommodations or to shift the way we do business and to simply keep acting as though things are normal is another layer of disturbance that we have to talk about as well.
Yeah, I'm just, given that this is a barbershop discussion, I'm just gonna, keep it in that barbershop ambiance. Personally, I never watched the George Floyd murder. I just could not bring myself to watch. I mean, I know what the outcome was. I saw snippets in the news with the officer, Chauvin, with his knee in his neck. I saw that. For me, I do not think that I would have had the reserve to be able to watch that video and then go about my everyday life like everything is everything. Somebody would have caught it. Okay, just keeping it all the way 100, as they say. Somebody would have caught it. So I didn't want to react in that manner, but at the same time, a reaction is well deserved, is well past due. Okay, in just my personal opinion, if this matter is not rectified. And I'll talk about that in a second as well. If this matter is not rectified soon, this great country can literally be torn apart at the seams. Now, having said that, what I mean by that is, this country gains its strength from the diversity, okay, of all the citizens. Okay. I mean, America, when we learned about what America was like, Puritans coming over after being, persecuted in England, they come over here, they find indigenous people already here. So, you have the Irish influx, the Italian influx, not necessarily in that order, but, you have various peoples coming here. Then, of course, you have, other, people who are melanated, okay, coming to this country. All right. So, it just seems like if you're melanated and you're coming to this country, you may not get in. Okay. Or you're still going to be lumped into the category of, you're this kind of black person, or you're this kind of, and I'm not using the term that they would use, for Arabs. There are just different derogatory statements, for example, for Hispanics and, for, African descended peoples, but all of that diversity is what makes America be great. Okay. What one food that, and it's just, kind of random, but still pertinent. One food that everybody eats on a regular basis. I don't know, Rashad, you probably eat it as well. Pizza. Okay. Pizza's not an original American dish. It's Italian. Okay. So again, that culture, that those people coming over here sharing that culture with America, and now it's an everyday thing. We don't think anything about it. Okay, so my point is, different cultures, different peoples can bring different things to America, and that makes America all the better, all the richer. As far as cultural aspects, so if this is not rectified with, I consider Black people as the soul of America. Okay. And so if this is not rectified, then, the United States is on the verge of damning its soul.
Great. Well, and while we're on and again, thank you all for sharing. While we're on the topic of race, because I know, Dr. Rashid, you talked about the trauma, right? And you know, being a black male, I have black sons that are watching these injustices play on TV, and I'm having to somewhat have those talks. Um, and race is, I think, race trauma has a direct relationship to mental, your mental state. When was the first time you experienced, one of you are experienced racism, and how did it impact you?
I'll start off with this shot.
All right.
So the first time I experienced something that was racist, I was in the 7th grade. So I'm from a small town in Paducah, in Kentucky, called Paducah, Kentucky. So it's Western Kentucky. So at that time, back in the late 70s, early 80s. Now I'm dating myself, but nevertheless, the way they would stratify the students, it was based on your ability. So so you were in the upper level class, mid level class, low level class. All right. So this is even in middle school. So 7th grade, in middle school, I hung out with a diverse group of people, but most of them were white because of those were the classes. I was in class with a lot of these people. Very few black people were in the upper level classes. So a lot of the people that I hung around with, they were white. I noticed that there were some subtle differences in the way that they treated me versus the way they treated others, we'll just say in their clique. Okay. And I know all of these people, for the most part, they lived in a certain part of town. I did not stay in that part of town, obviously. So I watched them interact with among themselves. They interact with me. It would be a little bit different. I didn't pay much mind to it. I was just like, okay, that whatever. So this is how it was 6th grade year, 7th grade year. So, I'm still doing the same thing, hanging out with them or whatever. And we were in class. Class was about to start one day. And a couple of who I thought considered my friends at the time, were sitting behind me. And, they're just joking, whatever. And, I'm turning around. We're laughing, giggling. And the white guy right behind me, says in a joking manner, at least he thought it was a joke, "Shut up and turn around, you." And I was just like, my body instantly got hot. Okay. And so that was the rage, the outrage, like, what? And so, I had to contain myself, but I stood up and was like, "What did you say to me?" And so at this point, I'm standing up and I got my finger in his face and I'm like, "If you ever say that to me again," and I was like, "I'll kill you." So the rage, just in that moment, I was just like, I can't believe he said that to me. Especially now, this is somebody who I thought was some semblance of a friend, because for the past year and some change, you've never said anything like that to me in the past. I know our interactions were only in school, but you never said anything like that to me in the past. And so to say that to me, I was just like, wow. Now, mind you, the teacher was standing in the doorway. Okay. He witnessed the whole thing. He didn't say a word. And it was a white teacher, white male teacher. He didn't say a word. So I'm under the impression, even to this day, he heard the whole exchange. And that's why he didn't say anything, because in other circumstances, I would have been in trouble, if you will, because I say that. But I'd have been like, well, look at what he said to me. Okay. So, so that was my actual first instance with racism, and me having to deal with that on a personal level for myself, as like, because this was a personal attack, and I'm like, it's not like I was never raised to view the world in black and white, as far as that. if you're a good person of good quality, good character, you're a good person. Okay. And, you know, and I was raised to treat you as such, you know, regardless of how you look, regardless of any of that, you know. And so, just, you know, like I said, just the fact that that was what was said to me when I was trying to live by that morality, that code, and that's what was said to me. Yeah, it took me aback just for a second, but then that's when I was like, okay, all right, well, new plan starting tomorrow. So from that point forward, I would say the majority of my associates became African American. Okay. It's like I just immediately was just like, okay, stop that, you know, and then I'll go over here. Now, you know, that came with its own, you know, set of issues, but nevertheless, that was my first experience with it.
Yeah, no, that is a good question, Cecil. And I feel like my experiences were a little bit maybe inverse because I grew up in Houston, Texas, and you know all the schools that I went to were almost completely Black schools, and so that was my experience coming up. But you know there are ways that we recognize when we're experiencing a racist incident, and then there are things that are happening to us that we don't even realize are shrouded in this racial smog, this racial environment. And one of the expressions I like is that, you know, racism isn't the shark in the water, racism is the water. And so I think about when I was born, did my mother receive proper medical care in the hospital, or was she not treated properly, which we know Black women have disproportionate negative experiences in childbirth. I think about the house I came home to. Did I come home to a redlined neighborhood? Was my neighborhood redlined and were our property values decreased? And so were we living in a neighborhood that didn't have the same level of resources and the same level of access as other neighborhoods? I think about just all of those kind of things that I'm growing up in as a child that I have no conscious knowledge of, but they're shaping my life experiences to that point anyway. And so the first school I went to what degree were property taxes being used to support and resource that school differently than other schools that might have had primarily white students? So there's all these things that are happening. And then we get into the consciousness of it, to Dr. Ali's point. Now, what am I seeing that I can then interpret as being or as experiencing a racial difference? So when I go to the corner store before I walk into school, and when they're following me around the store to make sure I'm not stealing anything,
Right.
I can recognize that. Or at minimum, I can recognize this isn't right, or I'm being treated differently. But we still are sort of dealing with how to understand that. And so as we break it down kind of like that, there's a slew of experiences that in many respects begin to sort of characterize the kind of experiences that, you know, Black, Latinx, Indigenous people in this country sort of learn to live with. And that's the insidiousness of it, is that when I go to the store, and if I'm waiting in line, but someone else gets called first, did they just not see me? Or did they see me and decide they're not going to call me yet?
Right.
And so am I crazy? Am I too sensitive? Am I missing something? You know, all of these kind of cognitive acrobatics that we're doing, even in relatively benign situations, I think articulates some of the subtlety that living in a racist society oftentimes puts pressure on us to navigate. And then there's the outrightness. You know, we can talk about the level of police violence that we've seen viscerally in the past year as being obviously, you know, destructive and obviously rooted in systemic and structural racism. And then everything in between, you know. So it's very hard to articulate. And I think fundamentally the question then becomes, So then what are people going to do about it? And, we can tell these stories all day long. We can tell them to a million different audiences, but then what are people going to do? And a lot of the research actually shows that not much. Like, people are going to listen to your story, but that's not going to necessarily change behavior. And so how do we actually then start translating experiences into strategy that helps us move policy and structures in ways that are meaningful? And that might be a later part of the conversation, but I'm going off on a tangent, so I'm gonna stop right there.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Again, but barbershop, barbershop.
Exactly. And it's funny when you were just speaking and you talked about the example you said racism is not the shark, but it's the water, right? And sometimes you're just put in those situations where I was thinking, I just went somewhere and I was thinking, right, it's kind of like that consciousness that, that I walk into a store and then, I'm wondering, am I seen, or am I seen so much that I'm going to do something wrong? And I have enough money to buy whatever I'm in the store, I wouldn't be in the store if I couldn't, but it's really not for me now. It's for my son that is going to have to deal. He's going to have to live in a society that still looks at him as a young Black man. And that sometimes I don't know how to assist, because I've already lived with it. I'm kind of ingrained, right? But then how do I take that and make sure that he understands? So when he goes out, that he understands there's certain things he can and cannot do, certain things he should not do if he gets pulled over. All those things to me become a mental burden that I don't know the answer to.
Mhm. Yeah, because we're, going back to this idea that racism is the water.
Mm-hmm.
We've learned more or less how to swim.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that everyone is going to swim to safety.
Right.
I mean, we can talk about the instances where people are stopped by police, for example, and do everything right,
Mm-hmm.
but are still injured or killed, right? We can talk about me going into a store and having enough money to buy what I'm here for, but still being treated differently. We can talk about me working in an institution, doing everything right, and still not having the same opportunities as other people. At some point, there are limits to what our education of the next generation can protect them from.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have to shift to say, how do we begin to address these institutions and these policies that are generating the problem in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
We can talk to a kid living in Russell and say, hey, kid, we want to help you get the education. We want to make sure you have mentors. We want to make sure you get that first job. We want to make sure you get, all the help you could get. But if that kid is still living in a neighborhood that doesn't have equitable resources, that is still suffering from the scourge of redlining, that still isn't going to be a place where all of the sort of supports that a young person needs, that a family needs to thrive, then at some point we have to address that thing. Because if not, my fear is that we start pathologizing communities. We just start saying, okay, well, Black folks just aren't any good. Well, we're doing a whole heck of a lot with a whole heck of a little.
You're right.
And so at some point the math has to change.
Right.
Yeah. So you're talking about, again, I'm going back to your analogy, you're talking about swimming, right, in a racist, or at least the racism, and transitioning back to the mental health side of it. How do we know, what are the warning signs when someone should seek help? When I say help, meaning a professional help, or when what are those warning signs that say, you know what, this has been on my mind. This is, driving me crazy. I need to seek some other help outside of what I can do for myself.
Sure. As a child and adolescent psychiatrist, first and foremost, I'm just gonna break it down from the perspective of how I would basically triage patients who I interact with. So clearly, if you have any thoughts of self harm, you want to harm yourself because of an incident you have witnessed, or or because of something that has happened to you directly, or a member of your family, and you want to harm yourself as a result of that. That's a time to seek help. Another time is in the instance if you're thinking about harming someone else. That is a time to seek help. Now, I know in the moment, if you are the one who is experiencing some racial trauma right at that moment, you may not be able to just say, okay, I need to run to Our Lady of Peace right now. I need to run to U of L right now and get an assessment. But we as Black men and Black women, and we feel this unspoken pressure every day. Okay, when we walk out of our doors, automatically it's there. Okay, and I have tried to help explain this, illustrate this to my white colleagues and friends. It's just like, our experience is different than your experience. Yes, we have some congruencies and there are some parallels, but ours diverges in a way that yours does not diverge. Okay. And so, feeling that pressure, feeling that, that thought of wanting to hurt somebody or hurt yourself, definitely a time to seek help. If you are having thoughts to where you don't know what's real and what's not real. So if your reality is starting to fracture, now don't get me wrong, you have to be able to understand, what's a real threat, okay, and what's not what's an imagined threat. But given that our stress level and our sensitivity to this issue is heightened because it's always there. It's a stress response. It's always there. Okay, so whenever you feel like you're about to lose control, okay, whether it be, I'm about to wild out and, tear everything up in here, whatever the case may be, or if it's anxiety, fearfulness to the point to where you're like, I just don't even want to leave out of my house, because I know I'm expect before I even get to my stop sign down here, it's going to be somebody that's going to say something to me or do something to me, so when you cannot carry out the day-to-day aspects of your life without feeling that pressure, that it feels like there's something on your heart, okay, something heavy, and you can't get it off, but you know what it is, what I'm saying, but at the same time you're just trying to push through it. It does become a point to where that monkey, or in this case that gorilla on your back, you've got to get some help. Okay. And so, like I said, I would say, in the moments of wanting to hurt yourself, hurt somebody, if your reality seems to not be lining up like it should, if you're feeling depressed for any reason, but in this case specifically due to some racial trauma that's been experienced or witnessed, or anxiety, fearfulness that's like I said, that's stopping you from doing activities of your daily life. Those are moments to seek help from professionals.
And I was going to ask a question, and maybe Dr. Rahman, maybe you want to take it. So those are, from what I understand, Dr. Ali, you saying those are the warning signs internally. But maybe someone, one of our listeners is joining in. What are the warning signs for them looking at someone? Maybe they're wanting to know if their loved one, their child, has those what are the warning signs they're looking for?
There isn't a whole lot that I can improve on from Dr. Ali's clinical analysis. There are things, do you know someone who's lost interest in things that they're normally interested in? If you've got a kid who loves soccer and then all of a sudden they're like, I don't want to play soccer ever again, that might be a flag. If you have someone who's giving away all of their belongings, these are some of the sort of traditional flags. Folks who are sleeping more than they usually sleep or less than they usually sleep. They seem far more active or energetic sometimes. Then all of a sudden there's just nothing. There's sort of a vacuum of energy. Like these really extreme fluctuations of behavior, I think sometimes can be a sign that you need to check in on someone. But then again, you want to, really talk to a professional like Dr. Ali to do the kind of assessment that'll really make sure that a person's okay. Maybe you're just going through something, or maybe there is a greater need. The only thing that I would contribute in addition to that is, we're still in the barbershop, right? So let's talk about diagnosis. The practice of diagnosing has been, and I would argue remains, a deeply racist practice. In the 60s, the diagnosis of schizophrenia was used to label civil rights protesters and get them incarcerated.
Yes.
The use of labels in that nature there's still differences in the kind of labels or diagnoses that are given to Black children versus other children. We're oftentimes viewed as dangerous, more aggressive, more in need of legal interventions rather than health interventions. And so, we could talk about if I'm angry. Well, anger can also be a symptom of depression. But if I'm angry, and if I'm rightfully angry because I'm being treated differently, then I might get labeled as well. And we don't talk about that. We don't talk about kids in school who say, hey, Dr. Ali, hey, I'm being treated unfairly. You're probably right, because when I look at the data in JCPS, when I see the suspension rates, I'm seeing Black kids, and right now Black girls, their suspension rates are out the roof. Mm-hmm. And so I'm seeing really unfair treatment for Black children who are doing the same behaviors as white children. But I'm seeing Black children be suspended more frequently, expelled more differently, arrested, when there's SROs present. And so school resource officers present. And so there is a difference in treatment. And these kids are not lying to us. They are telling us their experiences, and we're not listening. We're saying, you must have X label, Y label, Z label, you need this medication, And so we continue to invalidate young folks. And so when I think about what we do, I think part of it is all the healing that needs to happen for us isn't all clinical. There are other ways that we need to heal. And so advocating for yourself is a deeply therapeutic thing to do. Being able to advocate, being able to express your own agency, that I might be a person within this space, but I have rights. I can advocate for myself. I can advocate to be treated fairly. And so when I see young people, like the young folks at U of L, the students who are speaking up and standing out and saying things aren't okay here right now, we have some issues with what's going on at U of L, for example, that's a good thing. It's a good thing for young people to be able to stand up and say, we have issues with a particular thing. We have problems. It's not fair. We want to see things change. And that is healing. That is also therapeutic.
You're muted.
Yeah, we're still in the barbershop talk, and
right.
This is going well. So, we're all Black men, right? And we know for a fact that there is that quote unquote stigma on getting help, right? There is that that concern that that we're not getting the help that we needed because of that stigma. I want to talk about, how do we break down some of those barriers, kind of remove the stigma of seeking help?
I'll say real quick, some of us might get lucky, right? I might go to an organization and get to work with a Dr. Ali. I might get lucky. I might get to work with a provider who is culturally responsive, who is not going to dismiss my experiences, who's going to sit in uncomfortable space with me when I talk about my experiences. I might get lucky. But the other part of this conversation, when we talk about reluctance to go to therapy, is that most people don't get lucky. Most people go to providers that do not treat them equitably, that do not believe their experiences, that do not center who they are, that ignore parts of them, and are quick to just sort of, let me just get you and get you out. And so if we're not talking about the institutions that people have been going to and rightfully do not trust and justifiably do not want to engage with, if we're not having that conversation, we're having a disingenuous conversation. Don't tell me to trust you when I saw what you did to my mom, I saw what you did to my uncle, I saw what you did to my little brother, and I see how you are. I see what you do. So don't tell me to come in and to trust you and just to believe that things are going to be okay when I see things aren't okay. So first, let's deal with that. Let's make sure that we're dealing with that reality, and then maybe we can build a relationship. But the problem, I think, and this is actually true across the board, is we want to get to the resolution part, but we don't want to deal with the truth and the acknowledgement part.
Right.
And as long as you're doing that, I can't trust you.
Yeah. Wow. Dr. Ali.
Yeah. So, I think first, I'll put this out as first, but going back to what, Rashad was saying, it's about being fortunate enough. So, if you have access to a provider who looks like you for therapy or for medication management, whatever, psychological evaluation, that's a plus. Because when you start to discuss some of the things that have you in whatever state you're in, your hope is that, well, this person who looks like me should be able to understand and appreciate the things that I'm going to say. There's not a lot of, trying to see how I can put this. Basically, subtleties in that interaction are going to be understood, and some things don't need to be spoken because both of you already understand automatically. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, you dealt with that, so I know what you was feeling personally. So let's deal with that. So first and foremost, having providers who look like you is one way to, I think, get Black people in to services when they need them. But unfortunately, there aren't a lot of Black providers, whether we're talking about therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. So in those moments, should you still seek help? Yes. But now we fall up. Now this task of trying to remove this stigma falls on the laps of our white colleagues and friends. So now they have to be able to make this Black person feel comfortable enough to express their real concerns and what's really been going on. Okay. And then start trying to slowly work through it. And I do mean slowly because, as guarded, being guarded is definitely going to be what our white counterparts are going to get out of someone from our community trying to seek out their mental health care or anything to that matter. You're going to get that guarded, everything's all right, when clearly everything's not all right. Affect, and everything is all, you can already tell that they're not all right. But, there are some things that they don't want to address. Well, because they don't feel a connectedness with their provider in this sense. Again, having providers who look like us or look like the patient, okay, and then of course, when those providers don't look like the patient, being receptive and being able to have those conversations, because I could imagine that for some of our white colleagues, they're going to really have to be thick-skinned, and I've explained this to some of my colleagues already when they're talking about delivering mental health care to African Americans, especially along the lines of race-based trauma. That they're going to have to be thick-skinned. Don't take what you hear personally, okay? Because you're going to, because it's like it's restricted, it's guarded, but once you pinprick that wall, the catharsis will just, and it'll go from a pinprick to an explosion. And then and I could see where that could leave some people trying to provide care were like, oh my God, they attacked me. I asked them about this and they attacked me. And it's like, no, it's not directed at you. Okay. This is a catharsis about our day-to-day experiences in this community. Okay. In this country, in this society. Okay. And so, as Black people, I think that we have to take ownership of our own health. We cannot rely on anybody else trying to tell us when we don't feel good, when we're sick or when we're troubled. Okay, we know when we're struggling with something. It's being honest in yourself and being just real about the situation. It's like, man, this stuff is really getting to me. The stuff, the whole Breonna incident, the whole George Floyd incident, the numerous other incidents over the past 6 months to a year where Black people have been harmed or killed at the hands of the police for complying. And I'm not saying that every situation like that the assailant was being complicit. Sometimes they had a weapon in their hand or whatever the case may be. But we've seen this play out before where they've had weapons, and if they were white, they didn't necessarily get killed. They got wounded. And you're like, wow, okay, you wound them. They had guns. They've killed 6, 7 people. They get wounded. I may have a gun in my vicinity, and I've told you about it, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're taught as a law-abiding citizen. And then I get the guns drawn on me because you now know that I have access to a weapon. Okay, so I go off a little bit of a tangent. That might be something we discuss in the upcoming minutes of our talk. But again, we have to be responsible. We have to own it. And I think again, one of the ways that that we're going to help to break this stigma is having discussions like this. That the community can see, can participate in, ask questions. I think those things are going to be very helpful in helping Black people to eliminate that stigma to seek mental health.
Yeah, I totally agree that we have to, in order to break down the stigma, we have to talk about it more. We have to feel comfortable with having these topics of conversation within my fraternity. A couple of years back, we decided that mental health was something that we need to discuss and be more transparent about, because we're considered leaders in the community, but how can we lead when we're struggling with all of the things that come with mental health and all the challenges with social injustice. So yes, we have to continue to keep discussing it and making it not something mysterious. It's kind of like when you sit around with family, you talk about what's going on, and sometimes you don't want to overlook those that are things that are going to make us healthier. I feel like we should take mental health just as serious as we go to the doctor. So whenever we go for a checkup, we should be making sure that we're mentally getting a checkup as well. So,
Cecil, you said something that I thought was really important, is that we need to sort of demystify it. We need to just, let's just make it normal and simple. And I think, especially as men, because in many respects, I think as men, we kind of like hold down our emotions. I think society tells us that as men, we can't express ourselves emotionally.
Yeah.
And I think I like how you said it's like, let's make it simple, because like, just tell, when was the last time you told another man that you love him? Like, I love you, brother. Like, I appreciate you. Like, how you doing? I think just things like that are simple, just let's communicate how we feel, and I think that is a pathway into some of these other things we're talking about as well.
Yeah, I think we just in life we build up that shell because we have to be strong. We have to be, we have to be the voice. We have to be the leaders. We have to be the strength. But we need help as well. And I don't think that men are kind of open to say that it's okay to cry. Like you said, it's okay to tell another brother that you love them. That you care about them and their well-being is important. So I think those are the conversations that we need to have, no matter if it's in the barbershop or, in the workplace or, wherever that message needs to be relayed. I think that's a start.
Yes.
All right. We're winding down. We got roughly about 10 minutes left. Any closing thoughts? Any questions that I've been looking at the chat and just checking for questions, but any topics that we feel like we need to discuss, or again, any those who are listening, if you have questions, throw them in the chat and we'll try to get them answered. But for my panelists, any closing thoughts? Anything that's on your mind?
I'll defer to you first, Doc.
Man, I mean, there are so many different things that I could say. So, I'm just going to say that I'm glad that we were able to do this talk, and to just kick these things around as three Black men of this community, and hopefully people who are watching this, listening to this, can benefit from some of the things. This might be that icebreaker. That somebody might have needed to go, you know what, man, I think I need to go talk to somebody. It's like, cause man, at work, man, I feel like they always on me and it's like, I'm on the verge of kind of, so I need to go talk to somebody, so hopefully this talk will be one thing that can help propel them in that direction to seek some help, I just hope that this was beneficial for people, which I really hope and pray that it was, and hopefully we can get to have another discussion like this again in the future.
Yeah, and I'll add, I just loved to, again, Cecil, let's just make it simple. What are the simple things that we can do, that we could say? How can we just start expressing ourselves a little bit more? I think is good. And then I just think that as so many of us who work in organizations or who work for institutions, we may not have all the power in those institutions, but we can still be advocates. So in our own seats, how do we start saying, hey, how are we as an organization making accommodations? How are we acknowledging our blind spots? How are we working towards correcting some of these things? So are we looking at our data? Are we looking at our policies and our practices? Are we looking at our outcomes? What outcomes are important to us and which ones do we want to really focus on? And how do we make sure that we're the kind of organization that our community feels comfortable coming to? Because that's on us. We are the ones who are running this institution, we're managing, we represent this organization. We need to be the kind of place that people feel comfortable coming to. And so we've got to do that work. And it might not be done overnight, but we got to stay committed to it so that we can so that we can be the kind of place that we want to be.
Yeah. Outstanding, outstanding. All right. Well, as we close, this. Let me make sure I check the chat one more time again. I don't want to leave anyone out. I think. All right. So I think we did a great job. I didn't see any questions on the chat, so I think we covered it all. I mean, and I know we didn't cover it all because I mean we could probably go on for hours, right, in this discussion. But the hope is we continue this discussion. This doesn't stop here. This is just the beginning. And as you mentioned before, we just got to continue to talk about it to where it removes some of that mystique, and hopefully some of that stigma will go away. All right. Well, thank you, our two panelists, for joining us. You all did an outstanding job. I appreciate your time and your commitment. This includes the Winners for Wellness event. It's been a great day and a half, and it's wonderful that so many people could participate in the event. Thank you so much for all the presenters, the panelists, and organizations who were involved in making this event happen. A special thanks to 7 County Services, Bellwood and Brookline, for understanding the importance of this topic and making this event a reality. Again, it's been a couple years in the making to make this possible. We hope you found the content meaningful, through provoking and thought-provoking, as well as seek to make changes to help move our communities forward. I encourage you to keep these discussions going after today with your family members, your co-workers, at the barbershop, in your place of worship, all those places. And let's continue to watch out for one another. You never know who may be struggling and who needs just someone to talk to. On Monday, you will receive a brief survey to give your thoughts on this event. We ask that you take a few minutes to complete it. Thank you again for attending the Winners for Wellness. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You too.